Good morning, boys and girls. It is Wednesday. Happy Wednesday this morning. Just some ideas for you to be working on. You could work on a math box today. Don't forget to read. You can be reading every day. 15 minutes a day would be awesome. You can work on part of your packet. I know Mr. Nurkirchen sent a video about relaxation. Take time and watch that too. Anyway, okay, last time we left off and where the red fern grows, it was pretty intense, you guys. Mrs. Seinfeld started crying. That's why she shut the video off. I'm going to try to get through this today, guys. We'll see. I got my Kleenex, got my reading glasses, got my book. We'll see how I do today. Okay. So, what was happening in our story, boys and girls? Can anybody tell me? Yeah, old Dan got in that fight with that mountain lion, and he ended up getting his tummy cut open by a claw, and a lot of the insides of his tummy was outside of his body. And Billy got him home and was hoping that they could sew him up and that he was going to be okay. All right. Where the red fern grows. Pa just got done telling Billy that, old Dan wasn't going to stop fighting because he has only two loves, you and hunting, and that's what Pa had told him. All right. If it hadn't been for them, Pa, I said, I probably wouldn't be here today. What do you mean, Mom said? You won't be here now. I told him how the lion had leaped at me and how my dogs has gotten between me and him. They were so close together, I said, when they came up off that ground, they looked just like one, Papa. There was a moan inside for Mom, and she covered her face with her hands and started to cry. I don't know, she sobbed. I just don't know. I don't think how close you came to being killed, Billy. I don't think I can stand no more. Now, Papa said as he walked over and put his arms around her. Don't go all to pieces, hon. It's all over. Let's be thankful and do our best for old Dan. Do you think he's going to die, Papa? I asked. I don't know, Billy, Pa said, shaking his head. He lost an awful lot of blood. He's a mighty sick dog. All we can do now was wait and see. Our wait wasn't too long. My dog's breathing grew faster and faster, and there was a terrible rattling in his throat. I knelt down and laid his head in my lap. Old Dan must have known he was dying, because just before he drew his last breath, he opened his eyes and looked at me. Then with one last sigh and a feeble thump of his tail, his friendly gray eyes closed forever. At first I couldn't believe my dog was gone. I started talking to him. Please, old Dan, don't die. I said, don't leave me now. You can't leave me now. I looked to Mama for help. Her face was as white as the bark on a sycamore tree, and the hurt in her eyes tore at my heart. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words could come out. Feeling as cold as an Arctic wind, I got up and stumbled to my chair. Mama came over and said something to me. Her words were only a murmur in my ears, though. Very gently, Papa picked up old Dan in his arms and carried him out onto the porch. When he came back in the house, he said, well, we did all we could do, son. And I guess it just weren't enough. I'd never seen my Pa and Ma look so tired and weary as they did that night. I knew they wanted to comfort me, but didn't know what to say. Papa tried Billy. He said, I wouldn't think too much about this if I was you. It's not good to hurt like that, Billy. I believe I just try to forget. Besides, you still got little Ann. I wasn't even thinking about little Ann at that moment, but I knew she was all right. I'm thankful that I still have her, I said, but how can I forget old Dan? He gave his life for me, Pa. That's what he did. He just laid his life down for me. How can I ever forget something like that? Mama said, it's a terrible night for all of us, Billy. Let's go to bed and try to get some rest. Maybe we'll all feel better tomorrow. No, Mom, I said. You and Papa go on to bed. I think I'm going to stay up for a while. I couldn't sleep no way. Mama started to protest, but Papa shook his head, and arm in arm they walked from the room. Long after my Mom and Pa had retired, I sat by the fire trying to think and couldn't. I felt numb all over. I knew my dog was gone, and I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to. One day they were both alive and so happy, and then that night, just like that, one of them was gone. I didn't know how long I'd been sitting there when I heard a noise out on the porch. I got up and walked over to the door, and I listened, and it came again. It was a low whimper and a scratchy sound. I could think of only one thing that could have made that noise. It had to be my dog. He wasn't dead. I had such hope in my heart. He'd come back to life. With a pounding heart, I opened the door and stepped out onto that porch. What I saw was more than I could stand. The noise I'd heard had been made by little Ann. All of her life she had slept next to old Dan's side. And although he was gone, she had left the doghouse and had come back to the porch and snuggled up close to his side. She looked up at me and whimpered. I couldn't stand it. I didn't know I was running until I tripped and fell. I got to my feet and ran on and on and on, down through our fields of shucked corn, until I fell face down into the river's bank. There in the gray shadows of a breaking dawn, I cried until I couldn't cry no more. The chippering of gray squirrels in that bright morning sun told me it was daylight. I got to my feet and walked back to the house, and coming up through our barn lot, I saw my pa feeding our stock. He came over and said, "Breakfast is about ready, son." "I don't want no breakfast, Pop." I said. "I ain't hungry and I have a job to do. I gotta bury my dog." "I tell you what," he said, "I'm not going to be busy today, so let's have a good breakfast and I'll help you." "No, Pa," I said. "I'll take care of it. You go and eat breakfast. Tell Mama I'm not hungry." I saw a hurt look in my pa's eyes. Shaking his head, he turned and walked away. From rough pine slabs, I made a box for my dog. It was a crude box, but it was the best I could do. With strips of burlap and corn shucks, I padded the inside. Up on the hillside, at the foot of the beautiful red oak tree, I dug his grave. There, where the wild mountain flowers would grow in the spring, I laid him away. I had a purpose in burying my dog up on the hillside. It was a beautiful spot. From there one could see the country for miles, the long, white, crooked line of the river and the tall, thick timber of the bottoms, the sycamore, birch, and box elder. I thought perhaps that on moonlit nights old Dan would be able to hear the deep voices of the hounds as they rolled out over the river bottoms on the frosty air. After the last shovel of dirt was patted into place, I sat down and let my mind drift back through the years. I thought of the old KC baking powder can, and the first time I saw my pups in the box in that depot. I thought of the $50, nickels and dimes, and the fishermen and the blackberry patches. I looked at his grave, and with tears in my eyes, I voiced these words: "You were worth it, old friend, 1,000 times over." In my heart, I knew that there in the grave lay a man's best friend. 2 days later, when I came in from the bottoms, where my father and I were clearing land, my mother said, "Billy, you'd better look after your dog, son. She won't eat." I started looking for her, and I went to the barn, the corn crib, and looked under the porch. I even called her name, but it was no use. I rounded up my sisters and I asked if they had seen the land. The youngest one said she'd seen her go down into the garden. I went there calling her name, and she wouldn't answer my call. I was about to give up. That's when I saw her. She had wiggled her way far back under the thorny limbs of the blackberry bush in the corner of the garden. I talked to her, and I tried to coax her out, but she wouldn't budge. I got down on my knees and I crawled back to her, and as I did, she raised her head and looked at me. Her eyes told the story. They weren't the soft gray eyes I had looked into so many times. Her little eyes were dull and cloudy, and there was no fire. There was no life. I just couldn't understand. I carried her back to the house. I offered her food and water, and she wouldn't touch it. I noticed how lifeless she looked. My father came out and looked at her. He shook his head and said, "Billy, it's no use. The life has gone right out of little Ann. She has no will to live without old Dan." He turned and walked away. I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe it. With eggs and rich cream, I made a liquid, and I pried her mouth open, and I poured it down her throat. She responded to nothing I did. I carried her to the porch and laid her in the same place I'd laid the body of old Dan, and I covered her up with lots of gunny sacks. All through the night, I'd get up and check on her, and the next morning I took warm, fresh milk, and again I opened her mouth and I poured it down her throat. It was a miserable day for me, and at noon it was the same. My dog, my little Ann, had just given up. There was absolutely no will to live. That evening, when I came in from the fields, little Lamb was gone. I hurried to my ma. Ma told me she'd seen her go up on the hollow in the house. So weak she could hardly even stand, Ma said. Mama had watched her until she disappeared into the timber. I hurried up the hollow calling her name. I called and I called and I called. Gotta get a Kleenex, boys. I went up to the head of it, still calling her name and praying she would come to me. I climbed out into the flats, looking and searching and calling. It was no use. My little Ann was gone. I had thought, a ray of hope. I just knew I'd find her at the grave of old Dan. So I hurried there. I found her laying on her stomach, her hind legs stretched out straight, her front feet folded back under her chest. She had laid her head on his grave. I saw the trail where she had dragged herself through the leaves. The way she lay there, I thought she was still living, so I called her name, but she made no movement. With the last ounce of strength in her body, she had dragged herself to the grave of old Dan. Kneeling down by her side, I reached out and I touched her. There was no response, no whimpering cry or friendly wag of her tail. My little hand was gone. We'll finish it tomorrow.